So hi, you're back here with Tony V on healing art. Or as I always say, how could it be possible that art could help heal you? Now, if you've watched video, the introduction and video one about the elements, you know that I'm sharing on video two about how humans are multi-dimensional. And what that really means, I'm going to be talking at length about the first and the second dimension part of ourselves and how that all works, how that fits with our environment, and how potentially that could help us heal just with this simple bit of knowledge and understanding of how this all fits together and works. I always say it's stuff you were never taught at school. So let's get started. If humans have access to 5 dimensions, what exactly does that mean and how does that work? Right, so take a deep breath. These 5 elements, I always use the analogy that they're like the terrestrial television channels. So we all know there's BBC One, there's BBC Two, there's ITV, Channel 4 and Channel 5. Now, imagine you're watching ITV. Is it true that BBC One and BBC Two, Channel 4 and Channel 5 are actually all broadcasting at the same time as you're watching Channel 3, but you can only see Channel 3? So as I sort of describe it, in our reality, what we're experiencing is what we're just tuned into. But it doesn't mean that the other channels are not broadcasting, so they're not out there. They're definitely working away, but we've effectively got them switched off. Yeah, so we've got Channel 3 switched on, Channel 1, 2, 4, 5, they're just switched off and we're not aware of them. We don't know what's happening on those channels, yeah? So think of the dimensions like this. So let's just walk through dimension 1 and dimension 2, because for the most part, these two parts of us are what we would describe as unconscious. So we're not aware of them, yeah? We're not got them in our everyday experience because they're in this sort of unconscious part of us, yeah? So the first dimension is known as the world of the minerals, or the mineral world, yeah? Now, the planet, of course, if you think of planet Earth, which we inhabit, of course, this ball that's not only spinning round at something ridiculous speed, somewhere around the 700 miles an hour mark. In other words, we are sitting on this planet and it's zooming around like this at 700 miles an hour. That's pretty amazing as you think of it in its own right. But then it's flying through space at something, if I remember right, about 30 odd thousand miles an hour going around the sun. So it's like massive movement. And basically it's a ball of rock. Some people would argue it's actually a sort of a crystal ball in some ways, yeah? Because crystals are like a mineral. So this basic rock that's flying around and spinning around at the same time is one huge ass mineral. Now, if I said to people, how much of the earth is water, which is also a mineral, most people go, well, about 70%. And the interesting thing is that 70% of the earth is covered in water. Yeah, 70% of the surface of the earth. So we're roughly looking at 30% is land and 70% is water. But actually, if you took all the water out, you're left with just a tiny percentage of actually the whole planet is water. But look, that's neither here nor there. At the end of the day, water and the rock that is the planet is all made of minerals. And this is what we call the mineral world. So as we look at ourselves, we say, so what part of us is mineral? Now, interestingly, around the 70% mark is actually water. So it's sort of said, look, if you took all the water out of your human body, then there's like 70% of us is gone. There's only this 30% left. Now, of that 30% that's left, there's still a huge chunk of us that is mineral, i.e., for example, our skeleton. Yeah, now most people sort of think of our skeleton as made of calcium. Obviously, it's a big chunk of calcium. There is other elements to it, of course, but let's just keep it simple, yeah? So we've got 70% of our body's water. Then you look at our skeletons, another big chunk of us, that's made of calcium, which is also a mineral, yeah? Then we have these sort of radical minerals floating around our body. Things like zinc, potassium, all of those sorts of, chemical things we heard about and learnt about perhaps at school. We've got them floating around inside our system, and they help us in various ways to, stay alive, basically. Yeah. So look, if we took all of our minerals out, that would be like our bones and our water and the free radical minerals that are bombing around our system. Really, humans are like the Earth. This giant chunk of us is a mineral. So as we think of ourselves in that form, then basically we are allied, you could say, to the mineral kingdom, which is known as the first dimension. Now, as I say, this part of us is unconscious. So I always say, look, you don't walk around and suddenly think a thought saying, I wonder how my water's getting on, or I wonder how my bones are doing. Now, you might say my bones aren't doing too well if you've got pain. You've got inflammation. Maybe you've got arthritis, or you've got, a broken bone or whatever. That will be definitely giving you some physical pain. So, yeah, as you think of your physicality and your physical challenges, then often our mineral world is where that challenge can lay. So again, I have to just say this is sort of outside of mainstream science. We're in the esoteric bucket here, right over on the right wing, and the alternative bucket in the thinking here. But, stick with me, because look, if we just can understand that this big chunk of us is the same as the Earth, and indeed is the same as a crystal. So as I was sharing earlier, this crystal here, I was sharing on video 1, this crystal is known as Tiger's Eye. And of course, it's a mineral. Now, what's interesting about crystals is that they are very specific in their form. There's all different types. And if you get into the more esoteric, you can look up what does a crystal mean. It's got like meaning to it. Now, it's definitely outside of science. So, don't start trying to look for proof and evidence, because there isn't any proof and evidence that any of this is true. We are outside of the science bucket here. And as we look at people that have worked on this is again going back much into sometimes ancient times where all this stuff was worked out, modern science wasn't even thought about, then people give meanings to these things. But one thing's for sure is that each crystal or each mineral on the planet, each different one, actually has a different, what we call, vibration. So it has like a different energy. Now, if it's true that everything is energy, then actually we can align ourselves with these certain energies. So the minerals in us and the minerals in any particular crystal, we could align ourselves with them. Now, let me just give you an example of how we could bring our crystal awareness into some sort of perspective with the modern world. I'm going to just notice I've got my phone here, yeah? Now I've got a lovely iPhone here, got my piece of art on there, yeah? And on this phone, if you think of it from a mineral context, it's said there's around, I'm not sure the exact number, there's about 140 different minerals. It takes about 140 different minerals to make your phone. This whole thing that makes it just be able to swipe your phone, where you go boom, boom, or up and down and what have you, that is one mineral. That mineral, I can't remember exactly what it's called, comes from the Congo, and it's a very rare and quite expensive mineral. But look, without that mineral in action, it wouldn't, we wouldn't be able to slide our phone like that. So that's pretty impressive, isn't it? And then if you think of like quartz crystal, which is the sort of the biggest crystal that exists. In fact, all crystals tend to be a bit of a derivative of quartz crystal in the first place. Then if we think of quartz crystal, you think about your average watch, your modern watch. Your quartz crystal is what's holding like its time. Yeah. Think about all sorts of stuff like your television. This has got if without quartz crystal, none of this electrical stuff that we have in our world today would actually work. But think about deeper context. So quartz is one of the key ones. All the other minerals that go on to make up our everyday life today are very powerful. So if they could run your phone, what else can they do in their more raw form? So obviously I learned all about crystals and how they work, and I've used them on myself, of course. I always go, look, you know, when you're into the healing art, not just the art, you know, in picture form, but the art of learning to heal, the most important thing, in fact, I never call myself a healer because I believe that's a bit like a doctor. In other words, we don't want to come to healing really. I'm not saying you're wrong if you're doing this, but you don't want to go to a healer. In other words, what we're doing, what we've got to be careful that's not so powerful, is that we give our power to somebody and say, please heal me. So whenever I'm doing this healing stuff, I'm always going, well, when you come to me, then I'm going to teach you how to heal yourself by learning some, you know, new perspectives on things, and then teaching you a little bit about how to use them so that you can have a new life experience. So that's sort of how it works. So the power of crystals is incredible, as we can see with modern day technology, but also when we use them in their rawest form, then they can be used to do different things to different parts of us. So I'll go into that a little bit more deeply. Now, that's sort of dimension number one. It's the world of the minerals. Remember that the Earth, planet Earth, and our humanness are made up of a huge part of the mineral world, and that in that mineral world can live some of our pain. Certainly some of our more physical pain is interacting with that part of us. Yeah. So what is the second dimension? Now, each dimension that a human has access to is like a musical scale. So think of like an octave of notes. You've then got the next octave and the next octave, yeah? And they are sort of a level higher in their vibration. So just the same as the dimension. So down here at the first dimension, that whole dimension has a frequency about it. That is pretty rigid actually. You know, everything in the mineral kingdom lives in that vibrational sort of frequency zone, yeah? So the next frequency up is actually the world. If we look at the planet, it's the world of the plants, and the vast majority of the animals, the animal kingdom, live in the second dimensional part of, you know, our humanness, should we call it, yeah, or the planetary version, mirror, should we call it, of our humanness, yeah. Now, the human part of the second dimension is our cellular world. Now, humans are made of trillions and trillions. I think somebody has quoted something like 75 trillion individual cells that are working away. Now, there are multitudes of different types of cells. So, for example, our organs, like our heart, has got heart cells, and then we've got skin cells. These cells, if you look at them under the microscope, are quite different. But look, without these cells, we're nothing. So this cellular world is literally functioning 24/7. But of course, like with the first dimension, we don't exactly walk down the road going, well, I wonder how my cells are doing right now. We just don't. We just have those they're in our humanness, but not in our conscious awareness. So again, they're unconscious of us. So when we look into our outside world, then we see this beautiful, amazing part of planet Earth, where every blade of grass, every insect that lives inside that, underneath the grass, you know, if you dig up the grass, there's always a bundle of insects there. These all live, you know, every animal you see pretty much, the birds, you know, the all other creatures, the fish, they all live in the second dimensional part of planet Earth. Now, interestingly enough, the human part of us, this cellular part of us, it's said that this is where our egoic self lives, where our ego lives. Now, I'm going to be talking about your ego and how that works in another video. So I'm not going to go into detail now, but one thing's for sure, you definitely can't go to the doctor and go, doctor, I'm having a bit of a challenge with my ego today. Could you take it out? Because he's going, well, where is it? Where does it live? You know, it's something that's a non-tangible element. Now, our egoic part of us is also where masses of our pain sort of resides. So huge amounts of our emotional pain, for example, live in our cellular world. Now, most people, and again, look, the science-based world, they're not going to be sort of necessarily agreeing with this, so we're not going to sort of go into Google and go give me proof and evidence, because there isn't any. This is again experiential, and there are many teachers out there that teach this sort of stuff, but it's just not in the mainstream. So when we start to understand that out in the big wide world, we've got all the animals. There are a few exceptions on the animal front, things that have got a bit humanized, like dogs, for example. Horses, amazing creatures. They tend not to live so much in the second dimension. They're much more like us. And, well, definitely, look, the creatures that perhaps the most advanced creatures on the planet, in excess of ourselves even, will be things like the whales and the dolphins, yeah? These things, you've only got to look at their brain. If you study a little tiny bit about the dolphin brain and the whale brain, you go, right, okay, these guys are looking like they're a bit beyond us in terms of advancement. Now, obviously, they're not using their brain to, use technology or anything like that. But it's like they have mastered their environment. The only thing that mucks up their world is probably the humans, which is, probably the biggest problem that planet Earth has right now, is that there's 7.5+ billion people living on the planet, taking all of the resources that it's got to create our everyday life. Yeah. Anyway, let's not get into that. It's a different subject. So let's just take on board that there's these two different parts of us. Our first dimensional world, that's mineral, and our second dimensional, which is cellular. And these little cells are all alive. They're all interacting. They're all doing their absolute utmost to keep us alive. It's quite an incredible world. But this is the world where our emotionality is stored. And it's also the world where our egoic part of us tends to live. So as this sort of unravels through these videos, we're going to see a little bit and learn a little bit more. But this part is really just about learning about the dimensional elements of us. So I trust you've come into some awareness about yourself here, this unconscious part of us that's ticking away 24/7, known as the first and the second dimension. So I'm going to see you in the next video, and we're going to be talking about the third and the fourth dimension and how that all works. So until then, bye for now.